I'm Chris Boswell. I'm in Boy Scout Troop 677.
And I am George Iler. I am representing the Vietnam-era veterans.
What rank did you serve in the war?
The time I spent in Vietnam was January 1968 until January 1969. I was promoted to first lieutenant en route to Vietnam, so I spent my entire year in Vietnam as a first lieutenant.
What type of hardships did you have to go through?
Excuse me. I guess the living over there was probably about one of the most interesting things that you had. You weren't really prepared. Did not have hot and cold running water. We had electricity, which was by portable generators, and it was kind of an interesting thing. Your sanitary facilities were four-holers.
So what made you decide to go to?
What made me go? When I went to college, I started in 1961, and the Vietnam War was starting to build up. I decided probably the smartest thing to do would take ROTC, which is what I did. So I went through college. I was commissioned as a second lieutenant after graduation. Waited a few months before I went on active duty. I thought it'd probably be, I knew I was going to get drafted if I didn't go through ROTC because my grades weren't that good. And I wasn't married and I didn't have any children or dependents, and so that would make me pretty much eligible for the draft. And I figured, well, I thought it'd be smarter to make a choice as opposed to taking a chance. So I said, as an officer, I might, life might be a little bit better than, the enlisted. But I found out later that probably wasn't really true because we all live about the same way. After I went to Fort Knox, Kentucky to get my basic officer training out of the way, I went to flight school.
So what type of good memories did you get from Vietnam?
There are some things that you kind of forget sometimes, and as I said, I was at we had a reunion this weekend and saw a lot of people I had not seen since 1969. Brought back some good memories, and we all kind of agreed, it was a very tight-knit organization, a lot of good camaraderie. We had a lot of esprit. We knew that if something happened to you, that there would be those people backing you up who would be more than willing to go out there and get you. And that was exactly what happened. If an aircraft went down, the entire troop mobilized, and we all went out and we worked very diligently to get whoever was down out of there. So those are the good things you remember. There's funny things that happened and strange things that happened, but moments of sheer terror and lots of moments of boredom. So it was kind of just like after a while it just kind of became rather routine. There was always something you knew that was going to take place. You knew that you were never in a secure area because no matter where you were, the enemy, the bad guys, were around somewhere. So you couldn't let your guard up, but then you just had to understand the situation and behave accordingly.
What do you feel morale was like?
I think our morale was very good. We were a small group, probably about maybe 100 people all together in one area. So we were not next to the headquarters. We were far enough away that we could act semi-independently. But since everybody was in this together, we were all working together and very, very cohesive that way. Sometimes you hear a lot of things about the drug abuse and the marijuana smoking and things like that in Vietnam. We didn't see that when we were, because each one of us had a specific job to do, and basically our lives depended upon the people we were working with. We didn't have time, you might have a beer or two, but that was about the extent of it after work.
Did you ever question why you were in Vietnam?
Not so much when I went there. I went there because it was mom and apple pie, and that was the thing that said people, you need to do. We didn't know that much was going. We heard some things going back in the States, about the war protesters and things like that. But at the time, I thought, well, okay, this is a job, you got to do it. I think later, as I spent more time back in the States and doing other jobs, I had more of a time to read about it and understand it. And I don't think it was probably the smartest thing we ever did. But you have to look, then our involvement in Vietnam started almost right after the Second World War.
So, what do you miss the most from home?
What I miss the most from home? Being a person who likes to eat. Food, I think, and I think probably the funniest thing I ever thought about was a loaf of soft white bread. You know, when it's really, really fresh and you sit there and it just kind of gums up, and that was it. You know, eating a peanut butter and jelly sandwich was really, really good on some soft bread, because the food we had, a lot of the times we're eating sea rations, which are these little cans of stuff, which is, I swear it was left over from the Korean War era, and it's just you wouldn't have all your water was had to be filtered, chlorinated, and everything else, and so you never had fresh water. Most of our food that we had was it wasn't canned; it was the rehydrated stuff, where you get the big cans and dump the water in it, and you know, it's your eggs in the morning were like, boy.
Are there any events that you would want to relive?
Probably not. The ones that really get to you are the ones you think about. You know, it's I got shot at or shot up or something like that. You go, I don't know, what would I like to relive? Probably going home. I think that was probably the best thing.
What do you think was the hardest part of the war?
Seeing people, for me, seeing people die. People I knew, having to go in sometimes and extract them. You think you're going to do a medevac, but actually you're going to go in and bring somebody out who's dead. Somebody you know, and somebody you might have just been with several hours ahead of just before that. That's probably that is the hardest thing there is. But it's something you have to almost, you pull yourself back, because you can't dwell on that. Otherwise, it'll eat you alive. You know, you can do it later on, but you almost have to go into a bit of a cathartic state where you just say, okay, I've got to do this. I can't just focus on that. I've got to get away from it eventually. But right now, I got to get this taken care of. So otherwise, you might end up in the same thing. So it's just, yeah, that was the hardest thing, and it's true everywhere, I guess. You know, no matter what you do, when you see not necessarily a loved one, but somebody who you're very close to and you've been close to and you've been through an awful lot with, and something happens to them, and you're right there, and it hasn't happened to you. You can't sit there and go, why them and not me, and all the other stuff, because it'll eat you alive. So you just have to be able to learn to back away from it.
Hi, I'm Rachel.
I'm Jenny.
I'm Peter Karlovics. I'm a Desert Storm veteran.
What did you do before the war started? Were you in the Army?
I was serving the Marines. I graduated from law school, and I was set to be a lawyer, and I got called.
You deployed for?
Total of 5.5 months. It was a very quick deployment.
Did you move around a lot, or where you were
Yes.
stationed?
No, we moved around a lot.
What kinds of places did you go to?
We started in the Saudi port of Jubail. That's where our plane landed. We were deployed initially to guard an ammo supply point, and then thereafter we went north just south of Kafji, which was attacked by the Iraqis. We were at a place called Ras Al Mashab, and then we moved around the elbow of Kuwait, and then we went in with the 1st Battalion, 5th Marines, and we assisted in the taking of Ras Al Jaber Airport in the center of Kuwait.
Can you describe the conditions?
The conditions, well, we lived in tents, and we often felt like we were circus performers, because we kept taking down tents and putting them back up. As we were moving around, we had guys that had an incredible sense of humor, so we'd always sing circus songs as we were putting up our tents and taking them down.
Were you ever around civilians?
No, we had literally no contact with civilians.
So,
Probably just
Did you ever engage in direct combat?
No, I'm very glad for that. No, we did not. Most of Desert Storm it's really the last conventional war that the United States fought where you actually had a force that was, I shouldn't say that because the last war in Iraq, the current war in Iraq was fought in a similar fashion. But our war was a conventional war where airplanes did most of the fighting, airplanes and tanks. We were worried about having to go door to door in Kuwait City, but once the Iraqi armor withdrew, a lot of the soldiers went with the armor, so there was no Iraqi presence left over for us to fight in Kuwait City.
How did being in the war affect your personal life, like when you got back?
I just went back to living a civilian life, that's all. Just went back from military to civilian.
And if you could give any advice to someone thinking about joining the military, what would you tell them?
I would tell them to know what they're getting into. I would tell them to understand that real military life is not like the movies. It's there's a lot of hurry up and then wait. There's periods of boredom. There's periods of terror. So there are a lot of different emotions that you have when you serve in the military, especially in a war situation. So I always encourage people to know all the facts before signing up.